Now, according to the 2024 World Press Freedom Index, journalists in Nigeria are fearful of an increasingly hostile working environment. That index scores Nigeria in the 40 to 55 press freedom range, which is pretty low for a country that considers itself to be a democracy. The Nigerian Guild of Editors and the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, or SERAP, have also raised the alarm over what they say is the growing suppression of press freedom and free expression in Nigeria. They say journalists are being targeted with repressive laws such as the Cyber Crimes Act and the National Broadcasting Code, and are being harassed and unlawfully detained. But speaking at the annual Congress of the International Press Institute Nigeria, the Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, declared that despite what he called occasional challenges, the media in Nigeria remains largely free, especially under President Tinubu. But many media organizations say the minister's claim is not supported by the facts. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the president of the International Press Institute Nigeria, Rights-Mojeed. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How did it go today? It was your annual, your general congress.
Well, I think basically it went well because the gathering gave us an opportunity to x-ray the state of press freedom in our country, the state of journalist safety, and we were able to engage. There was some learning and relearning and unlearning. There were some contestations. People make claims, others countered, and but basically we discussed about how government, security agencies and journalists and media organizations can work together, because basically government claims it wants a better society. The media wants a better society. So the goal is similar, but how do we get there? How do we get to that destination? We differ on the path to achieving that, and so that's the whole essence of the gathering, because we were discussing a democracy, media freedom, and the imperative of protecting the Nigerian civic space, which we believe is shrinking. The minister differs. He said the civic space is not shrinking, but of course we had a guest speaker who also, like us, believe that the space is far from healthy.
Right. Well, we'll come to some more of that, what the minister said and so on in a minute. But on a crucial day like this, as you begin the annual General Congress of the International Press Institute, what is your assessment of the state of press freedom in Nigeria today, beyond what you've just told us?
Well, I must be honest with you that even though Nigeria cannot be said to be a terribly repressive country, because the media is largely free to report whatever they want to report, but we've had a lot of violations of journalists' rights. Of course, media organizations have not been targeted, but a lot of journalists have been targeted for several reasons. So I will say that we have a long way to go if we must rate really high, even like our neighbor Ghana in the World Press Freedom Index. We currently, and you know, what you see by the World Press Freedom Index is an empirical study, empirical gathering of data, a careful gathering of data. So it could not have been lying against Nigeria consistently. So Nigeria needs to do a lot. Currently, the cybercrime law is being deployed against Nigeria. We still have a lot of oppressive laws in our statute books. And then I think the most serious problem, what I've found in the past few years, I've been president of the IPI in Nigeria in the past 3 years. What I can see is lack of accountability. I can see that there is really no institutional agreement by government to oppress journalists. But there are so many power circles in Nigeria. Everybody is doing what he likes. A governor can abduct a journalist from Abuja, no accountability. Not that the president asked him to do so. A police officer can molest, violate a journalist's right, not because he has been told by the IG to do so. But when you call their attention to these violations, they usually do nothing. And that's the crux of the matter. Nigeria is not really serious about setting up a mechanism that deliberately protects journalists' rights so that everybody is bounded by that regulation. You know?
That's a very good point you make there. So in that respect, what is your reaction, again, beyond what you mentioned at the outset, to the claim by the Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, that press freedom is largely strong in Nigeria, despite what he termed occasional challenges? Would you reduce them to occasional challenges?
Well, I think it's becoming more frequent than occasional of late. I think the minister, to be fair to him, because he also is a media entrepreneur, he owns a newspaper, and he used to publish a magazine. I don't know whether he still does, and he owns a radio station, I guess. So he's a businessman in the business of media. So he tries to, I am aware, there was a time he spoke to me about helping him, IPI helping him do a collection about violation and the reasons behind those violations. Of course, we haven't been able to deliver on that for him because he said he engaged the president and the president was indeed worried. At least that was what he told me. So he believed that, I don't know which data he worked with to claim that it's occasional, but for some of us who monitor these violations, it's frequent. As you are getting out of one, you are getting out into another.
Well, yeah, finish what you're saying.
And the reason, as I said to you, is not because, you know, as I make the point that we actually have some very bad laws, like the criminal defamation, still in our criminal code. It's terrible.
Bizarre, isn't it?
It's really bizarre. So we still have that. Then, even now that they've cleaned up the cybercrime act, there is still room for it to be deployed against journalists. And there are so many other laws that have not been repealed in our laws that can be used against journalists. And so, but more worrisome, even though the administration of criminal justice system has warned the police against getting involved in purely civil matters, they continue to do so, to use whoever gets angry at journalists will go to the police, and the police will simply move against, they won't move against criminals, but they are very fast at moving against journalists.
And just to underscore the point that you're making, a report by the Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development shows that in 2024, there were 110 verified attacks on journalists and media professionals, surpassing the figure for 2023. There are incidents such as the detention of staff of the International Center for Investigative Reporting, or ICIR, police harassment of News Central TV journalists in Lagos, the arrest of photojournalists covering protests in Abuja, attacks on Channels TV journalists in Kano, etc. I mean, surely these contradict the Minister of Information's assertion and show clearly that journalists are facing escalating, not decreasing dangers.
Oh, definitely. I don't even need the data to tell you. Of course, data, empirical data like this puts the issues in clearer perspective. But the truth is that we all read this in the papers every day. And one of the arguments I've made to the government, I ask them, don't you get worried that as a democracy, on the pages of newspaper every day, almost every week, if not every day, journalists are harassed in your country. You don't get bothered? Are you not bothered about that?
And it contradicts the whole point of trying to be a leading democracy in Africa.
Definitely. This is a country that's facing dire economic situation, and you want investors to come to your country. Then you have to clean up yourself. You have to brand yourself. You have to take your rightful place as a leading democracy on the continent of Africa. But this issue of journalist safety is a real blight on all of this, on all the aspiration that Nigeria seems to have. Because how do you convince the world that you are an open society and that people can get justice when all you do is to haul journalists into detention? You detain them, you harass them over minor matters. But I make the point to you that the biggest problem is that there are too many abuse of power in Nigeria. The laws are bad, but the problem that we are having in Nigeria regarding journalists' rights is not just about the law. It's about abuse of power by individuals. Once you are in a small office and you get annoyed by journalists, remember even that the cybercrime law, you only need to annoy an official of government before it can be deployed against you. So, and that happens all the time. You only need to write a petition to the police and then you get arrested. That's all you do. So this power, small center of power, are behind a lot of the harassments that you see. Not necessarily because there is an institutional or a governmental position, unlike what we used to have during the military, where we know that the military was intolerant of criticism and all of that. But now, a DG can arrange a journalist's arrest. A businessman who has some money can arrange a journalist's arrest. A governor, I'm sure you've read about governors abducting journalists from Abuja and taking the journalists back to their states for incarceration. Why should that happen? At times they abduct them. There was a colleague of mine who used to work for The Guardian who was abducted from here and taken to Imo State. For what? If we have a single Nigerian police, can't he be invited by the police in Abuja? At times they will abduct journalists without their family knowing about it. At times they will barge into residences of journalists and beat the journalists up in the presence of their family.
And you made a crucial point earlier, which is the fact that if a country like Nigeria, beyond attempting to be seen as a leading democracy, wants to attract foreign investment, then it's one of the ways that the international community assess progress in a country is the extent of press freedom. And they also use that to measure the laws in the country. Because if the laws are not protecting the press, then they wonder how those laws will protect them when they come in.
Definitely.
Because they need the press in case they have, they have foreigners coming into a country. They need to be able to feel that there is an atmosphere of press freedom so that they can take their case to the press as well as to the courts.
Definitely.
And the two key elements for them is the rule of law and, free expression. And that rule of law obviously covers the media, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Or ought to.
Definitely. But, we like to focus just on the annual Press Freedom Index by the Reporters Without Borders, but there are a lot of other such assessments every year. Nigeria has never fared better. And so what I've been saying to government, this matter can be resolved. And that's part of what we tried to resolve today. Because today on our panels, we had the Director General of the State Security Service.
Right.
He gave a presentation today.
What did he say?
Definitely, he was saying that his argument was that their role is to to protect national security, which involves all of us, to protect us and protect Nigeria and make sure there is no chaos in the country. And that they gather information for government to protect Nigerians. But we gather information for the citizen. And so that the goals are different. But he argued that in the course of them gathering information and trying to protect the country, at times journalists cross their path. And that it's just that we need to understand.
And when you cross their path, they hit you with a sledgehammer.
No, he didn't quite say that.
Well, he wasn't going to say that.
He didn't quite say that. But his argument was that there can be a meeting point, between journalists, and because, according to him, both institutions need each other.
Right, but talking about that meeting point, I mean, you mentioned the Minister of Information. He was speaking at your General Congress today. Do you draw his attention to the fact that the climate for journalists isn't improving and that it is the responsibility of government to intervene, release detained journalists or ensure that they're released, repeal oppressive laws, and ensure that regulatory bodies like the MBC become more independent?
Well, that's where the IPI has been engaging the minister consistently. And I made the point to you that even at a point, he threw it back at us that do me a paper about what you think needs to be done to make the environment better, which we are working on. But I have also said to them that since these are cases perpetrated either by the police on its own, by the state security service, and at times even by paramilitary agencies, and even by individuals at times, that these matters can be resolved. What happens to the IG? Retraining his men on press freedom, rule of law.
Modernizing is the key word.
But even training and showing examples when they violate journalists' rights. Show example to one or two police officers, if it is indeed not an institutional decision. Show example, but there has never been accountability. If you report a police officer for bribery or for molesting a citizen on the road, they are likely to dismiss the police officer and all of that. But if it's a journalist, even if that police officer was perhaps procured by a businessman to harass a journalist, you report about it, nothing will happen to him. It makes me feel that maybe the police hierarchy feels really good when journalists are molested that way. So, but the point I've been making to both the agencies, all the agencies that we've been engaging, is that you can show examples, retrain your men. Nigeria, if Nigeria must indeed regard itself as a free and democratic country and an open country, you cannot continue on this path.
But I mean, for an organization like yours, the International Press Institute, Nigeria, but of course part of the Global International Press Institute, I mean, you've outlined for us very articulately what you might call the, deepening descent into oppressiveness. The environment getting infinitely more oppressive for journalists and so on. I mean, I wonder what you do in that respect, because you're watching it deteriorate year after year. We mentioned the figures at the outset from the World Press Index showing that things had actually got worse in 2024. The figures were worse than they were in 2023. I mean, do you try to use your leverage? I mean, you're part of the International Press Institute to, if you can't get the Nigeria, because clearly you're not succeeding if it's getting worse. If you can't get the Nigerians to act on it, the authorities, have you tried to use your leverage to get the international community to hold Nigerian authorities accountable? Because you mentioned that one of the things that you're finding impossibly difficult is getting people to be accountable in Nigeria.
Well, you know, I won't say that we haven't succeeded. If we were not working at the pace we are working now, the situation would perhaps have been bad.
Been worse.
Yeah, it will have been worse. I mean, so recently, I'm sure you are aware when the other paper, newspaper, made a publication about the State Security Service, that the State Security Service invaded the National Assembly with a view to supporting its change of leadership. And it turned out to be inaccurate, you know, just a mistake, an error, erroneous report by a reporter of that newspaper. And the State Security Service said that was a breach of security, and they arrested a staff of that newspaper. So we had to intervene. The staff was released, but then the newspaper was also then charged to court. We had to also, but what we are really interested in is not intervening in cases. Is a complete institutional,
changing the environment.
Yes, is a complete, which is the point you are making about a complete institutional reform.
Indeed.
That just makes the environment so that we don't need to even worry about such occurrences. So we are engaging. We are engaging.
Well, certainly your annual, your General Congress, which brought the Minister of Information, journalists, the Director General of the...
That's part of the engagement.
Of the State Security Service. I mean, that's an important gathering.
Yeah, the police was there, you know. And, you know, the point, you know why we are really engaging? Because I must be honest with you. There are a bit of some fault on our part as media. You know, at times, we must tell ourselves the truth. There are a lot of unethical practices going on.
Indeed.
Indeed. And there is also the issue of regulation. So that's why we are engaging and reforming gradually. One of the most important reforms that has happened is the setting of the Ombudsman Commission. Because what we do not want to happen is government regulation of the media.
Yeah.
You know
so you want to be self-regulated.
Yes, you know how much the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria has resisted the National Press Council from regulating it.
Absolutely.
Yet we have the NBC regulating the broadcast industry, and they've been draconian in some instances. But what we want to do is to get the National Ombudsman Commission to function very well. The evidence before us is that it is doing well at this point, but we want it to do more. Once we are able to do that, because somebody raised a point today, I think it was the DG of the SSS, he said they are willing to complain to the Ombudsman Commission if they are sure of getting justice. That the problem they always have is the frustration that when journalists misbehave or report in an unethical or inaccurate way, there is hardly accountability, which is what we are trying to deal with.
Right.
The issue of fake news, the issue of misinformation, the issue of blackmail by people who are not journalists. Unfortunately,
and the fact that some people, just the same way that you say they manipulate the police, some people manipulate journalists.
Definitely.
I mean, they even pay money to them to write stories or publish reports that are not fair to someone else.
But do you also know that there is even a problem about who indeed is a journalist now? Because now you just need to have a computer or a phone, set up a website, be publishing whatever. You are a journalist.
Yeah, I suppose there's a difference between traditional media and social
but
media.
When there are violations, and these people say they've been arrested for the work that they do, you have to come to their aid. These people perhaps have never been trained anywhere. So when the cases are growing, when you see some of the victims of this violation, there are people who have never worked in any newsroom. Some of them have never worked in any news. So there is a problem.
Yeah, that's a good point.
About sanitizing
the environment
the environment
itself.
itself.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that's why I made the point that the engagement is key. You know, a lot of the problem from government, from individuals.
But on both sides, it needs to be recognized that press freedom is essential.
It's not negotiable.
Yeah, and that if you do not have that adequate press freedom, that it undermines democracy.
Oh, definitely. And even when there are violations, our laws have provided for ways to deal with violations. Even whether the person is trained or untrained, whether you know, you've been libeled, or you've been defamed or slandered or whatever, there are proper ways to deal with these matters. So sometimes they accuse journalists of violations. Like there was a case that happened in Nasarawa State where
very briefly, because we're out of time.
Oh, okay.
Literally, we've got 30 seconds.
Okay, that's okay. Because I can't tell this story.
Well, in that case, we shall wait for another day to hear that story.
Yes.
But I want to thank you very much indeed. And Rights-Mojeed is the president of the International Press Institute Nigeria. And of course, that IPI is marking their annual General Congress today and tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. And thank you to Arise for supporting our, and you are supporting us generously, and we are grateful for that. Thank you.